Miriam with you today, and I'm sharing a background technique which is very simple but very effective. And for this technique I've chosen a tag. It's an MDF tag from Lisa Horton Crafts at That Craft Place, but you could use this on canvas, paper, card, however you wish to use it, but for purposes of today I'm using a tag. And the products I've got here to use is the MDF tag. These are really good. They're very thick, they're sturdy, they come in a variety of sizes to suit your project, and they're just so versatile, so I've got one of those. I'm also using the sunflower tag from Lisa Horton Crafts. Absolutely adore this. You can see it's had loads of use, and you can use it in a variety of ways. The really good thing about these stencils is that the mylar is really thick, so you really can put it through its paces and use loads of different types of mediums with this, and it works really well, and hopefully you'll see that from what I'm sharing today. I also have some grunge paste. This is from PaperArtsy. So grunge paste is a texture paste, and it's my texture paste of choice. However, you can use whatever texture paste you have. But the thing I love about this is that you can heat it with a heat tool and it won't affect the grunge paste at all. It will dry it off. And once it is dry, it is very sturdy. And I'm pressing this and it's not moving whatsoever, which is brilliant. I'm also using some PaperArtsy Fresco Finish chalk acrylic paint in chalk colour. I never like using white because white is just a bit too clean for me. I prefer off-white, and this chalk is a beautiful colour to use. So I use this one quite often. I also use buff often, but today I'm using chalk. And what I love about these paints is that as they've got chalk in them, it means I don't need to use a separate gesso or primer, and you'll see that when I paint my tag. It also dries incredibly quickly. Normally I would leave this to dry and they'd be dry within a few minutes. However, today, for the sake of the video, I am going to use a heat tool. I also have some PaperArtsy Infusions. Now, I don't know if you've seen these before, but these are coloured stains, but what is amazing with these is that they also have a walnut stain inside them. So when you react to the infusion with water, it reacts slightly differently, and a brown stain comes out, the walnut comes out a little bit, which is fabulous if you're using, if you're making a vintage project or you just want something a little bit different. But as you can see, the colours are also quite bright. For the tag I pre-made, I'd used only the one colour, which is the Sunset Beach, and you'll see how I muted the colour very carefully, so I didn't want it too bright. And that's something that I learned from Jenny Atkinson, and I've used ever since, and I'll show you how I've achieved that. But when I'm doing today's tag, I thought I might then use a second colour also in magenta, just to see how that looks as well. And then aside from that, I've got my paintbrush, I've got my spatula, and then I've just got some paper towel to dab some of the stain away later. So let's get started. I'll just move a few bits out of the way. First things first, I'm going to put the stencil over the tag however I want it. Now, the really important thing to note here is that if you are using texture paste with your stencils, as soon as you've used it, you really need to wash your stencil or put it in water to stop the texture paste from drying on it. If the texture paste dries, it might impair the stencil, it might impact the image on it, and in some circumstances, depending on just how fine detailed the stencil is, it could also ruin your stencil. So I'm using my grunge paste. As you can see, this is really quite thick. It's just lovely, and it, as I've already said, it dries really well, and you can also dry it with a heat tool if you need to. So I'm not going to spend very much time doing this. I'm just going to give it some texture. What you could do here, should you want it, or should you want, I should say, apologies for the bad grammar, is that once you've done this, you could leave the stencil on and go in with a stamp. That would give the areas with the texture paste some shape to them. So nearly finished that. Or you could also sprinkle some mica on instead of using the infusions, and that would also give a really beautiful effect. Glitter you could sprinkle onto these. Lots of different things you can do. I'll just finish spreading that a little bit. I'm not going to worry too much if it's not completely covered, because after it's dry I'll be popping some chalk, Fresco acrylic paint over it. Okay, that's probably fine for me, fine for the tag. Okay, so now for the full reveal, I'm just going to carefully lift that off, and this one will be dried or cleaned very shortly. I'll just leave that on the side for now. And you can see the detail that gives, and it's such a beautiful image. It reminds me of spring, and obviously hoping that spring comes soon, because it's been quite cold and chilly in Bristol certainly. But you can see the image on that tag, which is absolutely beautiful. Okay, so for purposes of the video, normally I would leave that dry naturally, but for purposes of the video I'm going to dry it with a heat tool, so excuse the noise. It really won't take too long, the texture paste isn't that thick. So let's try that and see how it is. Yep, completely dry, so you can see just how quickly that dried. And if I lift it up to the camera a bit more, hopefully you can see that heating it hasn't impacted the paste or the dimension or the shape of the flower either. Okay, just put my lid back on so it doesn't dry up. So the next thing I need to do is add a layer of paint. And as I said, the brilliant thing with these PaperArtsy paints is that because they're chalk based, you don't need to add a primer or any gesso to your project before you add the paint. And it also covers really, really well. And the paints come in different opacities. So there's an opaque, a semi-transparent and a semi-translucent, and a translucent. So the one I'm using today is an opaque, so this means it will give full coverage with one layer. So let's give this a go. I'm just going to go directly on. As you can see, I'm almost out of that paint, hence why it's upside down, but I do use it a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to give this a quick coat. You can see how well it's going on. And what I'm going to do is try to get into the little grooves where the petals and the sunflowers are. Okay, so I'm just giving it a very quick layer there. Okay, just finish that one off. So as you can see, that's one coat, and that's a really good coverage again. Okay, and what this does is when I add the infusions, it means that the infusions will grip onto the paint a bit more and just have a bigger effect. Again, I'm just going to zap that with a heat tool. Normally I would use the paint to dry on its own. Being chalk paint, it dries incredibly quickly, but obviously I don't want to spend any time on the video waiting for paint to dry, literally. Okay, so it's a very quick zap and that's now completely dry. So the next stage for my background is to add some of the infusions, and I'm going to start off with the Sunset Beach, which is this beautiful colour in the original tag I made. And as I said, the difference with the PaperArtsy infusions that they have a walnut stain in them, which means that you don't just get the pop of colour, but if you leave it for a couple of seconds, the walnut actually comes out and gives this gorgeous vintage effect, which I love. Okay. So important thing is always to shake your infusions to activate and mix the walnut up a little bit. Okay, and then you just tap some on, and you really don't need loads. A little goes a very long way. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to activate this with water, and then I'm going to dab it a little bit as per what Jenny Atkinson showed a few years ago, and that will just mute the colour. You could leave it completely and you could dry it straight away, but I just want to build up my colour bit by bit. So here goes. There we go. I absolutely love how that looks already, that colour, and you can see the walnut stain coming out. And if I leave that for a bit, the walnut stain will continue to develop and you'll get more of a brown and vintage effect. I'm just going to dry between layers very quickly. What I love is how the infusions pools between the shape of the sunflowers. I love that effect. All the different colours that come out, so you've got your sort of reddy pinks, you've got your orangey yellows. Really reminds me of spring and of flowers blooming, and then the sunflowers come in. Really beautiful effect there. And so now I'm going to add more to start building up the colour, and what I'm going to do now is start concentrating on the areas where I want a little bit more of the infusion colour and the pop of colour. And also it's the opportunity, if you've got any blank spots and you want a pop of colour there also, you can fill in any blank spots. Okay, so I'm going to activate it with water again. This time I'm going to go straight in with a heat tool. Going to mop up the bit that's gone onto the carpet. So that's after the second. You can see there's bits not quite dry, that's fine. You can see the colour has become a bit more intense and there's more of the walnut stain coming through as well. What I think I'll do this time is add some of the magenta and see how that reacts on my tag. Again, I'm shaking the bottle slightly. Okay, let's have a look. Oop. Was a bit too over generous there, but that's fine. I can just use my finger and I can spread some of that infusion out. There we go. Okay, so let's see what that does. Oh, look at that pink. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay. I will just dab that because I still want it to be a little bit muted. Look at that colour. Look at the paper towel as well. That's a lot of colour on there. That's beautiful. Right, let's give her a zap again. So Infusions come in a variety of colours. I think it's 24 in total, and they range from everything you can think of. There's some beautiful blues. One of my favourites to use is slate grey. There's a rusty car colour that gives a lovely rusty effect. There's multicoloured ones. There's all sorts. If you haven't seen them, it's certainly worth checking them out. What I love about the magenta I've just put on is that it's really pulled some of the walnut. I really like that. However, I want a bit more of the original Sunset Beach, I think. So let's go back in. I'm going to be a bit more heavy-handed because I don't want it to be too muted against the magenta this time. Okay, let's see what that does. Okay, that's react. Oh, look at that. I love this. Okay, let's give that another zap. Hopefully for the last time, because you don't want to watch me dry colour all the time. I think that's all dry now. Yeah, that's bone dry. Oh no, there's a tiny bit that's still a little bit wet. So there we have it, my finished tag background. And you can see the Sunset Beach, you can see the magenta, you can see where the walnut stain has started coming out, and I really like that bit there. Something else you could also do is doodle over the sunflowers with whatever colour pen you want to. Do some tangling maybe. You could do what you like with that. I think I'll probably add one of the Lisa Horton Crafts butterflies. and maybe a really nice happy quote on that. So there you have it. So there are my 2 tags that are ready now as backgrounds for other projects, and you can see the difference the magenta has made and just how much brighter, but thankfully not too bright, and that's because I dabbed my tag with a kitchen roll, a bit of kitchen roll as I was going, just to mute that colour a little bit, and I really like that effect. It just gives it a slightly more aged effect for me. So there are my 2 tags. I'm hoping you've enjoyed my video today, and if you have, please give me a thumbs up. Hopefully I'll be back to show you more techniques and to share more projects with you soon. Thank you for joining me.